Greetings from Alpha Tau Omega headquarters in Indianapolis. Today our guest is Kyle Jackson. Kyle is the Chief of Staff for Congressman Larry Bucshon. Larry represents Indiana 8. Before Kyle went to Capitol Hill, he joined ATO at Texas Tech. That was in 2000. He subsequently got his degree in political science, and more than 20 years ago, with his 2 suitcases, moved to Washington, D.C. He's been there ever since. I'm Wynn Smiley, and this is the ATO Show. Kyle, you grew up in Texas, and yet you're representing Congressman from the 8th District in Indiana. How did that transition happen?
Well, once you start working on Capitol Hill, it tends to be a very small place. Usually working for your home state is a good way to get your foot in the door. But after that, it's you work your way up and you can jump around. It's a very unique place in that way that people move around quite a bit. I ended up with the current congressman that I work for, Congressman Larry Bucshon from Indiana, that is on the House Energy and Commerce Committee. He was a cardiothoracic surgeon before he came to Congress. His focus is on healthcare. The Energy and Commerce Committee has a lot of jurisdiction over healthcare programs. And one of the issues that I worked on extensively as a policy staffer for a previous congressman was healthcare, and the opportunity presented itself to be his chief of staff at the point that I was looking to move into a chief of staff role.
So a lot of people look at Washington, D.C. and Capitol Hill and all of the politics, especially in today's world, regardless of your political persuasion, and just wonder what the atmosphere is like from someone who lives in it every day. So I guess it's my general question. You've been on Capitol Hill now for what we talked about earlier, about 20 years. I'm sure you've seen some significant changes. Does it feel as bad as everyone looking from the outside in thinks it is?
I don't think so. I think that, like anything else, the Congress reflects American society. That in Congress, you've always had workhorses and show ponies. And I think that through the number of channels, whether it's cable news now that those have multiplied, platforms, social media, there are more opportunities for the show ponies to get out there and be seen. It's not the days of 3 networks with a newscast every night. So it's not as bad as it looks. But to say it's not optimal, I have to agree with that, but it's not. There's still a lot of good work getting done, going under the radar that no one ever sees getting done. So you just don't read about it.
Right. So in your mind, when you look back over 20 years on the Hill, what are the major changes that you've seen just in the dynamic and the atmosphere and how things get done in D.C.? What are the major changes that you are having to deal with?
I think one of the biggest is the rise of social media fueling polarization. That I think information is a good thing. The American people need to be informed about what's going on, but you can go to the internet and you're going to find your flavor for just about anything. And so you have a lot of constituents that are loud about these sorts of issues that are out and about. So that's really, I think, an external pressure. But I think the biggest thing, too, that we've seen with the rise in social media is also members, just the large number of new members, the amount of turnover that we've had in and just in the House of Representatives in the past few election cycles is just amazing. When I started on the Hill in 2004, you had a large number of members that had served here, some in the post-Watergate days coming in, a lot that had come in the Reagan years, and certainly still a number that had come in post-1994. You had a lot of veterans that had a lot of legislative experience, whereas now you have a lot of new members that have come in. And while that's a good thing, new ideas are a good thing, I think there's also just a loss of institutional memory and the way that you get things done.
Yeah, I think most people, most people would be surprised because they think that everybody is in Congress for forever. And even in safe districts, the turnover is remarkable. And so ATO is part of Fraternity Sorority Political Action Committee, which is a bipartisan PAC that focuses on the issues that impact the Greek world. We also have an action fund. But one of the things that our lobbyist routinely updates us on are the number of seats that turn over, even if it's in the same party, so that the fraction of veteran members, especially in the House, I think would shock most people if they really knew. It's a small percentage after, say, 10 years of time passes. Certainly a majority of the members of Congress are new over a 10-year period. How does that impact just how members of Congress and how you, as Chief of Staff, have to continually connect with new people and forge new relationships and new ways to move legislation forward?
Well, I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is Washington, D.C., particularly in government, is a relationship-based town. That I know it sometimes seems bizarre to think, but Washington is a place that you shake hands and you give somebody your word. That still means a lot here because people can figure out real quickly if you're not living up to your word. Word gets around. It's a reputational town. So relationships take work and they take time, particularly when you're working on big issues that have large political implications. There has to be a lot of personal trust that's built up between members, particularly if you're working with a member across the aisle. I think that there has to be trust that if you're willing to go out on a limb and work on an issue and upset whether it's folks in your district, constituents, whatnot, that you're going to have trust on the other side. And so relationships take work. And, I think the biggest thing that we've had in the past few cycles that impacted that, obviously, is it impacted everybody, was the pandemic. And for a lot of Congress, particularly for a couple of years, there wasn't a lot happening here as far as in person. When members were here voting, the voting blocks were scattered, so there were not as many members on the floor at any given time. For right now, if the House of Representatives votes, all 435 members, when we're at full strength, go over to the House floor. They're casting their votes. But more importantly, they're standing around talking to one another. And the House floor is one of the last places in the Capitol complex staff can't go. It's floor staff that actually run the staff, the clerks that actually make the floor work, and the members. So it's a good place to have conversations, to get to know one another, as well as travel. It's another great way members get to know one another, and obviously those things were not happening. And so I think we've had a relationship deficit that it's going to take time to make up.
Right, and so the relationship business part of Congress sounds very familiar. It sort of sounds like what happens in a fraternity chapter.
It does.
And so the obvious transition is, let's talk about your ATO experience, why you at Texas Tech decided that ATO is the chapter for you. So let's start there. What attracted you to ATO in the first place?
Well, I think a couple of things. One, I liked the guys I met when I was going through, I guess we call it recruitment these days. It was rush in those days, but
And it's still rush. We can call it. As much as we want to say it's recruitment, I think undergraduates are definitely wed to the term rush. So I think we've quit fighting that battle so much.
so I liked the guys. I like doing research about in those days about not only what the chapter had been at Texas Tech. It's one of the original chapters that came on campus. It has its roots in a local organization that had existed before the university allowed Greek letter fraternities and sororities on campus. So there was that aspect that attracted me, but also just talking about the opportunities for leadership development. I think I approached choosing a chapter kind of twofold. One, do I like the people that are there? But realizing it's not a 4-year commitment. You're not signing up to join the advertising society. It's something that's going to follow you the rest of your life. And, and what are the opportunities that you can take advantage of through the fraternity at a national level? I think that the year that I joined, there had just been a Congress, maybe in Florida. And so the guys had come back from that really energized. And, I think there was a lot of synergies there. And there I went.
Right, exactly right. We were at the Hilton, Walt Disney Hilton in 1998 and 2000. And so they did come back from Florida, and hopefully they were energized. So that's great. So when you look back, even now, looking back to the experience you had as an undergraduate, what skills did you either strengthen or learn that you still use today related to the undergraduate chapter experience?
I think the biggest thing that I learned was to listen, not only be a good active listener, but to listen to what do other people actually want, not just the words they're using, but trying to figure out, okay, you're telling me X and I hear you, but what I think you really want is Y, and trying to help get to that. Because again, I think it's just being a good listener, and it's a different version of listening, not just what you're telling me, but actually trying to understand where someone's coming from and what they're trying to tell you. And I think, one of the other things too that I learned in the experience was just how to deal with other people and working towards a common objective, but also, frankly, having a space in which to encounter failure or setbacks and try to learn from that. I think that one of the, it's no one has a undergraduate experience without setbacks. You hope that in the grand scheme of things, they are minor, but it's an opportunity to encounter failure, learn from it, hopefully, and move forward and learn to deal with that. Because certainly as an adult and in life, and certainly in the job I have now in politics, no one wants to fail or encounter setbacks, but by virtue of dealing with other people, you always have the opportunity to encounter it, and you need to learn and grow from it in order to move forward if you're going to be successful.
Yeah, I think another thing that might surprise people is the number of members of Congress who have a Greek experience, and it's very bipartisan. It is members of Congress. There are more members of Congress who are a member of a fraternity or sorority, second only to the Boy Scouts. So it's the second largest affinity group and very bipartisan. Do those discussions ever come up? Do you tend to figure out pretty easily in terms of how you're dealing with folks that, oh my gosh, you must have, or still a member of fraternity or sorority, you had some kind of undergraduate experience that has taught you some things that you probably wouldn't have learned had you not been in a fraternity or sorority?
No, absolutely. I think it does come up. One of the things I think that about Washington that's incredibly unique is that the number of people that move here to work that aren't from here. I moved here in 2004 in 2 suitcases for getting established and putting down roots here. So there's a little bit of the experience of almost like you're going to college for a second time, that you're starting off for those first jobs, particularly if you work on Capitol Hill. The administration is a political appointee or one of the political parties, or, here in town in kind of what I'll call official Washington. It's a really small place and you meet a lot of people. And again, like college, you're meeting people and you're finding out, how do I relate with other people? Obviously, there is the kind of tribalism of political party. That's something that certainly I did not encounter in my undergraduate experience. Maybe it's a little more pronounced today, but that's kind of one filter. But after you get through that, it's, where did you go to school? No surprise. College sports frequently come into play, particularly when there are longstanding rivalries. And then you kind of move off from there. And then certainly the Greek experience is one that I think is certainly a common touch point. While not everyone's experience is the same, not every campus is the same. I think it's just a good experience. And what was your experience? And you can talk about it. And it's a way that you get to know someone that's not kind of the cliche introduction in Washington. Hi, my name is, what do you do? Who do you
Right.
work for? That it's another touch point to actually get to know someone as a person, not as their job title.
Right. So, looking at leadership and knowing what you know now, because anyone who is working on Capitol Hill has to be a very good diplomat, politician by the very nature of the job, and learning how to move things forward when everyone is not in agreement. I'm just curious, what advice would you give to undergraduate leaders who are not necessarily going to go into politics, but things that you know very well now because you have to do them every day that would serve them well, regardless of the profession that they may choose to go into?
Well, I think first of all, I would say take advantage of all the resources that ATO offers you as an undergraduate member. The ability to access the leadership programs, those aspects of personal development will pay off years later. I mean, first of all, it's a lot of fun when you can do it. You just meet other people. So there's that aspect of it. But also more importantly, I think it's helping set yourself up for success in the workforce, learning about who you are as a leader, how to be a leader, what can make one successful as a leader. I think that I look through my experiences through the regional leadership conferences, doing leadership at Allerton, the year that I was president of my chapter, serving as one of our delegates to Congress in Cleveland, working on those things, learning what successful leadership looks like, and learning how to lead with values. I think that's the biggest thing that you can carry forward. And certainly I took away from all of the experiences I had in personal development through ATO as an undergraduate was you have to be rooted in your founding values. You have to lead with your values.
And so, specifically now for undergraduates who may be interested in a career in politics, what advice do you give them, and would you give them if you are having a conversation with someone who really wants to get into the field?
Well, I would say, again, first of all, take advantage of those experiences, maximize your undergraduate experience, but then also look to get an internship, look to get involved. I think that as someone who hires staff on Capitol Hill, I always like to see people that have involvement because, again, Capitol Hill, Washington politics, it's a people and relationship based business. So you want to see not only can people work with others, as you point out, be a diplomat, be a good listener, but also eventually be a leader. I think as I look at hiring, I don't ever hire people for a job. I hire good people. I look to, are they promotable? Can I grow them in our organization, and go from there?
Yeah, and I would guess that if you see someone's resume and they have fraternity or sorority experience, that is definitely a point in their favor if you're looking at that resume.
Absolutely. Because, you don't have to be on your chapter leadership team to be involved. There are plenty of folks that are members that are involved. It's just I think I would say it's kind of a seal of approval, kind of good housekeeping type seal that someone's been involved. I think it's hard to look at the resume for someone that just went to school. Again, I'm not hiring in a relationship based business somebody that's necessarily just knowledge based skills. I'm not hiring someone to be an engineer, for example, that has the proficiencies, has gotten their certifications. And so, fraternity is certainly, sorority is certainly a big thing that I look for as far as, okay, I think they can probably deal with people because, again, just having gone through the experience myself, through the rush process, you're meeting people, you're having to, how in a very short period of time to recruit people to the chapter, and sell yourself on a really quick elevator pitch. And, you're learning those things on how to be in a relationship based business, just different scale.
Yeah, Kyle, what's an average day like for you? And I don't know if there's any average or not. Probably every day is its own unique experience. But what, just to give people a sense of a day for you, what's that look like?
So I think, while no day is the same, I think there are a lot of building blocks that are very similar. First big difference is whether the House is in session or not. When members are in Washington for votes, it's a very busy, fast-paced place. Probably when y'all been in town, certainly for fly-ins, Capitol Hill is a very busy place because whether it's fraternities, sororities, the Farm Bureau, school groups, what have you, a lot of folks come to Washington to meet with their legislators. And so it tends to be a very busy, crowded place. It's very fast paced. There's a lot of multitasking. So I'll come in, read through the newspapers, see kind of getting a jump on the day. Generally in the House, the mornings are reserved for committee hearings. The afternoons are for floor votes. That's also when we tend to schedule most of the congressman's constituent meetings that he's doing. And again, all of these things can be interrupted by votes on the House floor. I think it's an exercise in management simply because, like anyone else, time is the most precious commodity that we have, and there are more demands on a member's time than you can ever give. So it's trying to figure out how to allocate that in the most effective way that you can for the members' goals.
And then not only are you dealing with your congressman, but then you're also coordinating, hiring, managing a full staff of folks that are also working for the
Yep.
member of Congress. So
Yep.
that's another aspect of your job that probably not too many people think about.
No, I mean, as chief of staff, I wear many hats. If I'm doing my job right, it's just helping make sure the trains run on time, being here as a troubleshooter if problems arise, and helping our staff walk through possible solutions just based on my experience. That's if I'm doing my job right. And again, I also manage not only staff in the Washington office, we also have staff in Indiana in different offices there that are focused on constituent services and being the congressman's representatives in the communities he represents.
It's interesting. We were in DC. It's probably been a month, maybe 5 weeks ago, with I don't know, between 200 and 300 undergraduate fraternity and sorority leaders from across the country. And through our organization, through our firm, our lobbying firm, I think they set up something like 450 meetings for the students to go visit. Typically, it's staff. Sometimes it's the actual member, but generally speaking, it's the legislative director. Sometimes it's the chief of staff. But like you say, a lot of things pulling at everybody's time. But what's interesting is we had 5 ATOs, undergraduates, that came in. One had never been to DC before, so he was excited about that. And I think their experience of actually walking the halls of Congress, going into members' offices, and regardless of who they talk with, actually lobbying on a specific issue that they are the expert in, and having someone pay attention and ask intelligent questions to them about something that they're living. I think that is an unbelievably great experience for them. But also, I think they're surprised because whoever they're talking to say, we rarely get to talk to college students on an issue. College students aren't typically the people that lobby us. So we really enjoy this time as well.
No, I mean, I think that at the end of the day, our form of government is a participatory sport, that if you have an issue you're passionate about, and there's a legislative impact or the opportunity for legislation to pose an existential threat, you need to be in front of policymakers, whether it's at the city council level all the way up to the United States Congress, making sure that elected officials are getting your perspective. I think that, certainly the members I've had the privilege to work for all want to do the best job that they can do. They want perspectives. At the end of the day, as a former boss of mine was fond of saying, he has an open mind, but not an empty mind, and was always interested in learning from others, their perspective. I think in this job, certainly I can say that I generally learn something new every day. And if it's not something completely new, certainly there's validation for something I might have thought, hearing that perspective of someone's lived experience. So again, it's great that undergraduates are coming to Washington, because I think, again, even at the legislative level, there are something like, I think at this point, around 9,000 individual bills that have been introduced in the House of Representatives this Congress, and a very small subset of that will get a committee hearing. An even smaller subset will advance through the committee process. A smaller subset will make it out of the House, and it keeps going down smaller to that will pass the House and Senate, and even much smaller that passes out of the House and Senate is signed into law by the president.
Yeah, to your point, over the years, we've actually gotten 2 of our bills, actually it was the same bill, different Congress, passed by the House, died in the Senate, but passed by the House, and several out of committee. So that's important for sure. But I think what's impressive and what impresses our undergraduates is the realization that they have that what you said earlier, it is definitely a relationship business. So by our members going and connecting with staff members or actual members of Congress, and as well with cabinet folks in the administration, that those relationships become important regardless if there's legislation to be forwarded or not. If there is an issue comes up that's not necessarily legislative, we have relationships that we can reach out to see if there's a way to be able to influence whatever that issue is for good or for bad. So the whole relationship piece, I think, especially fraternities and sororities do that better than anybody else on campus.
Exactly.
I think that undergraduates don't really fully appreciate that aspect as important as it is throughout life, and certainly depending on the profession, but really every profession you go into, relationship building and the ability to have successful relationships, I think is very important and a very strong thing that fraternities and sororities cultivate.
Couldn't agree more.
Did you, I don't know, so everybody has different news feeds and whatnot, but I don't know if you're aware. I think that another thing that going to the Hill does for undergraduates, it enhances their sense of patriotism right there in the nation's capital. They're in the halls of Congress. They're talking with members of Congress or staff, and so it feels very patriotic. I don't know if you saw in the news a few weeks ago, fraternity members at UNC Chapel Hill, so University of North Carolina, were protesters were trying to take down an American flag, and fraternity men, and some ATOs were involved in that, were protecting the flag. Big photo, made national news. But I think that there is a small p patriotism just sort of inbred in fraternity membership, just as part of it being an important piece of Americana, piece of the nation's fabric.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that is absolutely true. I mean, I would just, for me, I think I see just our own founding purpose of healing the nation after the Civil War. Again, the vision was about building society. It wasn't an organization set out to build a bridge, to cross a river, or a local charity. Again, it was, about relationships, bringing two sides together. But the ultimate goal is to build a better society. And I think that, again, that still carries today. And that's a perfect example.
It's amazing if you look at the creed today. If you haven't, if folks haven't thought about it for a while, think back through the creed. It was written in 1880, but I'm not sure that it's not more relevant today than it was in 1880. It's truly amazing. Not one word of that creed has changed since 1880, and yet it really speaks to what is happening in the world and in society today. So it seems to be a timeless document. That's a good guide just in terms of expectations and how we a great way to view the world.
No, exactly. Couldn't agree more.
So, Kyle, as you look forward and knowing the politics that everyone is well aware, we're in a presidential election year, lots of stuff happening. Is your general outlook bullish on America in the future, or are you a little concerned?
I'm bullish. I think that certainly there are rough patches that we go through as a nation, but I like history. Did not major in history as an undergrad. I did political science, but love history. And I think one of the things that stands out to me are just these times in our nation's history. I mean, and I think, again, you can't find a time probably that's been tougher than the Civil War, and just what folks were dealing with, what Abraham Lincoln was dealing with as president. And so while, not trying to minimize the challenges we face together as a nation and as Americans, I think, I have confidence that based on our history as Americans, that we have encountered tough times. We have come together. We've moved through them for a better tomorrow. I'm confident that no matter how chaotic things can appear in communities across the country, to the nation as a whole, I think we still have great days ahead of us. I think that there are great things to come if we look to those things that unite us instead of looking at those things that divide us. And I think we're completely capable of doing it and will do it.
Great. Well, Kyle, thank you very much for taking some time to talk with us today. It's definitely a challenging atmosphere right now politically in this election year. Certainly appreciate your service and your contribution and your work on Capitol Hill, which most people would say that's not an easy place to work, but certainly appreciate the fact that you're doing it. Thanks again, Kyle.
Nope, appreciate you having me on, Wynn.